wants to listen.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Armina Fayan. I'm the Executive Director of the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative, an organization which identifies, supports, and amplifies the work of grassroots humanitarian leaders around the world. Welcome to another installation of the Aurora Dialogue series, a gathering of minds and spirits around the world around important humanitarian topics. We host today's session in partnership with the Tanenbaum Center for Interreligious Understanding. So much has changed since the last time that we gathered for an Aurora Dialogues just a few months ago. Sadly, much of it for the worse. The need for humanitarian aid, intervention, and attention, it feels higher than it has in recent past. And in a world so often riddled with these types of divisions and conflicts, it's essential to remind ourselves of the power of faith to bring us together. The Dalai Lama once said, whether one believes in a religion or not, and whether one believes in rebirth or not, there isn't anyone who doesn't appreciate kindness and compassion. I share this quote today because that beautifully encapsulates the essence of our discussion. Religion has long played an important role in guiding our actions and shaping our values. And today, we seek to continue that journey of understanding, seeking to explore how religion in its many different forms can be a catalyst for solidarity, peace, and positive change. We're privileged today to have with us renowned speakers who have dedicated their lives to interfaith dialogue, humanitarian work, and the pursuit of peace and harmony. Their insights and stories will guide us through the intricate relationship between religion and unity. I want to remind everyone that this talk is not just a forum for discussion, but also a call to action. As I mentioned earlier, there is a need for action out there now, possibly more so than ever. And so we hope that today's session will inspire you to become ambassadors of unity in your communities, using the teachings of your faith or spirituality as a foundation for building bridges and fostering understanding. I'm going to pass over now to our dear friend, Aurora Prize Laureate and Chair of the Aurora Global Movement, Dr. Tom Katina. Unfortunately, we're separated by time and geography, and Tom couldn't be with us live because of an unstable connection in the Nuba Mountains of Sudan, where he is the director of the Mother of Mercy Hospital, offering medical help to more than 2 million people. Just as a reminder, when we met him, it was 50,000. He recently asked us to update the catchment area to 2 million people based on recent developments and the development of his hospital. He's a passionate proponent of religion as a unifying force for good. And so he sent us a video message that I'll pass over to in just a moment. And after Tom's message, I'm going to pass over to our distinguished moderator, Dr. Azza Karam, Professor of Religion and Development at Vrije University in Amsterdam. And she will take the center stage to discuss today's topics. Thank you so much for joining us and have a wonderful discussion.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to be with you today at these Aurora Dialogues. My name is Tom Katina, and I'm a medical doctor and a lay missionary with the Catholic Church working at the Mother Mercy Hospital in Sudan's Nuba Mountains region. The Mother Mercy Hospital is a Catholic mission hospital founded by the Bishop of the El Bay Diocese in 2008 and is currently one of the few functioning hospitals in all of Sudan with its population of over 40 million people. Our hospital vision is to provide accessible, affordable, and quality health services to the marginalized and needy with the trained, skilled healthcare workers, regardless of tribe, race, or religion. I know that all faith traditions incorporate care for the poor and oppressed in their teaching, but I dare say that care of the sick and wounded is a cornerstone of the Christian religion. The Christian association with healing the sick and poor goes back to the early days of the church. The first real hospital, called the Basiliad, after its founder, Saint Basil, was founded in AD 372 in Cappadocia, which is in modern-day Asia Minor. The hospital was founded on the principles of Christian social teaching and an impetus from a widespread famine. It was the first time in history that free care was provided by medical professionals to the poor and outcast of society. Hundreds of similar Christian mission institutions were founded over the following century. This trend has continued up to the current day, where it's estimated that 40% of all healthcare in East Africa is provided by Christian mission institutions. Let us not forget that we are not heirs to a soft milquetoast faith, but one that has been built on the blood and sacrifice of martyrs and heroic people. St. Cosmas and Damian, St. Luke, St. John of God, St. Philip Neri, St. Aloysius Gonzaga, St. Camillus, St. Giuseppe Moscati, and St. Teresa of Calcutta, to name just a few who were involved in healing ministry. I say unequivocally that my religious faith is the major reason why I've stayed in this war-torn and remote region for so many years. I and my co-religionists would take our cues directly from our Lord Jesus, whom we also refer to as the divine physician. My Christian faith takes seriously the command of Jesus to take care of the least of my brothers and sisters. I personally have been given all the breaks in life: good family, stable home, the best opportunities for education, and it's my turn now to give back. Our good Lord has blessed me abundantly, and I need to share that blessing. The Bible is full of stories of Jesus healing the sick, and he commanded us directly to heal the sick, cleanse lepers. You received without paying, therefore give without pay. When Jesus advised the rich young man in Mark's gospel to sell all he had, give the money to the poor, and follow him, perhaps he meant it and expects the same from us. I know in my heart of hearts that I could not take care of this huge number of patients without the knowledge that God is with us in our struggle. I would not be able to put up with the daily frustrations, the daily heartbreaks, the tragedies, were it not for the assurance of God's love for us. It is for us to work hard, be faithful, and do all we can to care for our people, knowing that at times our efforts are all in vain and the patients die. The good Lord reassures us that we just need to maintain our faith in the midst of our imperfections. God knows all and will set all to order. We finish each day thanking God for the privilege of taking care of his abandoned children and asking him for the strength and wisdom to carry on with this work. May God bless all of you in your endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you. What a wonderful backdrop. We give our thanks to Armine and to the speaker, Dr. Katena, who I think has helped frame so much of the discussion and conversation I'm looking forward to having. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to all of you. It is a distinct privilege to be able to be here with you and with this amazing panel of remarkable people, each of whom is a legend in their own right. I will have the privilege of moderating a conversation and also hopefully raising some potentially provocative questions that I'm fairly sure each of our speakers can very competently enlighten and answer. I have an understanding that came to fruition in the 2016 World Humanitarian Summit, which was organized by the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. One of the key outcomes of this amazing meeting that took place in Istanbul was a showcasing of some of the data that effectively looked at trends that are geopolitical in nature and trends that are related to climate change, and predicted that 80% of what humanity will confront for many years to come will be humanitarian disasters in nature, some of them resulting from man-made action, others resulting from this planet that we continue to somehow end up abusing rather effectively. The understanding that 80% of what humanity will be confronting will be one series of humanitarian disasters after the other didn't somehow sink in until we began to see how this was happening around us on a daily basis. We began to see also that it wasn't one humanitarian disaster after another, but thanks to a great deal of anxiety and fear-based politics and greed-based economics and finance, we find ourselves confronting what the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres termed as a polycrisis, multiple crises happening simultaneously. When we were all collectively under the COVID lockdowns as a globe, this was a moment where some of us, hoped that there would be a dramatic transformation in our psyche, in our psychosocial outlook, in our financial understanding, certainly in our behaviors, and perhaps in our politics. Some of us may recall that the UN Secretary General at that time issued a number of calls, one of which was a global ceasefire. If we're all under threat of dying from a disease that knows no barriers or boundaries, we should all be equally concerned to not be fighting one another, was the assumption. But he also issued a call saying, this is a moment where faith leaders and faith actors have a very critical role to play. Why? Because this is a moment to call upon the higher, the better self, the consciousness that we all share and form part of that was collectively hurting, and therefore perhaps that call to action was so inherent in what faith brings out and necessitates, the moral call to action that should translate into not only the poetics of political dynamics, but also the politics of economy, engagement, partnership, and cohabitation. Many of us have come out of that space concerned, that space being that global lockdown and how we all behaved. We have been systematic, those of us in the humanitarian, human rights and development spaces, as well as peace and conflict resolution spaces, have actually been systematic in calling for the fact that, do you know something? We work in remarkable silos. It is as if that which hurts one part of the body does not hurt the other. It is as if climate is a separate and distinct area of human engagement. It is as if hunger is a separate and distinct area of human engagement. It is as if health, and so on and so on. And the truth is that all of these things are fundamentally interconnected, just like our human bodies are also fundamentally interconnected with one another and with this earth that enables us to live together on. But that interconnection, that intersectionality is something that we realized perhaps secular entities and organizations, whether they were governmental, intergovernmental, or non-governmental, didn't seem to quite get. The siloization is a direct result, some of us would say, from the Industrial Revolution of many decades ago, which taught us that there is a specialization of every single little item that ultimately makes up a whole, but each one of us should be specialized in a wee little part of. And yet, what every single faith-based and faith-inspired organization around the world, regardless of what the faith is, has systematically done since inception until today is to address the whole of the comprehensive nature of life itself and the beings on it. Faith-based organizations have not been known systematically or historically to be focused on only one thing at one time, unlike their secular counterparts. But we hoped that perhaps by bridging the secular development, humanitarian, human rights spaces with the faith-based and faith-inspired ones, we could infuse that logic of interconnection, interconnectivity, mercy, and mercifulness in being a little bit caring for one another and perhaps giving some of our own comfort for the other, as we heard in that inspiring speech by Dr. Catena. We thought, some of us, that when we brought that bridge, when we built that bridge of the secular and the faith-inspired, we may be able to bring some more of that merciful outlook that would help us work more cohesively with one another and more comprehensively on the multiplicity of challenges and opportunities that we face as human beings. One of the key lessons from the pandemic, however, was that it was not only secular organizations who tended to see that the livelihood of their own organization would effectively trump the collective well-being that was required. We realized that perhaps not all faith-inspired and faith-based organizations were as keen to engage, to ally, and to work in collective service, perhaps to forego the stamp of their own organizational name or their own religious identity. We realized that as human beings, whether we were inspired by our faith or inspired by secular values, all of which emanated from all faiths together, by the way, but let's just call them secular for the time being, we realized that perhaps the image was not as clear-cut in terms of our ability and willingness indeed to give up a little bit of what we considered very dear in order to serve the other. And we found that perhaps othering was not just something that secular values and secular organizations did, but perhaps othering was something that even though we are inspired by faith, we may also be culpable of. Whatever the results, we are living at a context and a moment right now where it is absolutely clear, once again, and for the umpteenth time, that we cannot live in isolation from one another. It is absolutely clear, and for the umpteenth time, that our faiths are indeed distinct and different, but they are still calling for the same kind of mercy towards one another, and now mercy towards the planet as well. So what do we need to do to be of service to one another? What is it that religions and faiths actually bring to the space of humanitarianism? This space that we know will be our normal for the rest of our lifetimes, at least, where we will be confronting many humanitarian disasters. What is it that religions can bring to this space, not only individually, by trying to argue that Islam or Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism or Hinduism are the most merciful of all, but perhaps by looking a little bit more critically at how we have worked together and why we may not yet have come up with the way of working together simultaneously for the benefit and the service of all, or perhaps we have. We have with us today some notable peacemakers, humanitarian activists, and human rights activists who have combined in their career a service to all of humanity, who are committed in their respective institutions to serving all, regardless of race, creed, gender, nationality, or any other distinctive features. We have, in short, a remarkable panel. I am delighted to call the majority of this panel my mentors, people whom I have learned a great deal from, as I have had the distinct privilege of working with over many years. Exemption, I am now about to make a new mentor, and that is Dr. Sara Ahmed. Dr. Sara Ahmed is a Tanenbaum peacemaker in action. For those of you who do not know, Tanenbaum peacemakers are unique human individuals. Tanenbaum seeks them out, supports them, gives them a platform for their work, and brings them together so that they can harvest their collective peacemaking and peace-building conscience. It is a unique initiative that I think we should all be active in acknowledging, recognizing, and supporting. And Dr. Sara is one of the Tanenbaum Peacemakers in Action. She is also a director of program operations in an incredible initiative, which I hope to learn a little bit more from, which is entitled Preemptive Love, precisely what we need. So we're looking forward to hearing from Dr. Sara Ahmed. We also have Ms. Deborah Boudreau, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Tzu Chi Buddhist Foundation, one of the first humanitarian organizations that I have had the privilege of coming across. You almost don't hear the name of Tzu Chi Buddhist Foundation. You do see tremendous work going on in many parts of the world, fundamentally built on the idea that you need to recycle everything that you have for the merciful use of everyone, and make sure that as you do this, you serve the planet's needs too. Sometimes it takes a while to realize that there's an organization behind this, but there is a beautiful, incredible organization called Tzu Chi Buddhist Foundation, built by women, built in the image and built with the imagination of women of faith leaders, recruiting and working globally for the welfare of all. We also have Ms. Ruth Messenger. Now, Ruth, like Deborah, is also one of my mentors and someone whom I first got to know when she was leading the American Jewish World Service, one of the organizations that serves the world based on Jewish ethics, values, principles, and way of operation. Ruth Messenger is today a global ambassador, which means that you will find her very wise understandings, sometimes cutting assessments, but always very service-oriented to the welfare of all. You'll find them in multiple fora. Those fora where Ruth resides are also spaces and places of mercy. And last but by no means least in this wonderful community that we have together, we have Monsignor Robert Vitilio. Monsignor Vitilio is affectionately known to those of us who have had the deep privilege of working with him in some capacity or the other over many years as Father Bob. Monsignor Vitilio is the Aurora Prize expert panel member and serves also as the Secretary General of the International Catholic Migration Commission. If you do not know this, this is a commission that serves hundreds of millions around the world. In short, we have with us an incredibly distinguished panel, not only because they are wonderful human beings, but because every single person, no matter their age, no matter their religious provenance, no matter their national provenance, have actually served selflessly through their institutions and in their own personal lives. And this is what we wish to explore together. If you'll allow me to please pose the first question to our youngest and yet deeply expert panel member, Dr. Sara. Dr. Sara, the questions that we have to pose are really about the work that you do. And we would like to know your own perspective on how you see religion playing a role in finding new ways to ensure a better future for generations to come. Please.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karam. In the communities, that especially in the affected community, in my experience where I worked in the Middle East or even outside the Middle East, as you know, the religion served not only as a moral guidance, but actually as like a kind of a full ethical framework that guide individual in their lives. People have commitment to their religions and to the religious voices that they follow. And because religions is not only about about the relationship of us individuals to God, but it's actually about the way of living and how you choose to live. It's kind of have been one of the most powerful tools that can be used to actually better the future. And the furthest, in some communities where we kind of notice the furthest people keep religion away, the furthest they get from where we want to get into the future when it comes to issues that we are trying to solve. So for me, for example, I work my capacity with both preemptive love and search for common ground is actually economic empowerment. So peace building through economic empowerment and sustainable development. And that actually, when I think about it, when I think about like interfaith motivation related to that, I think about the community engagement, building people, bringing people together from all different faith groups to actually start to build the solution that they need to see into the community. having all these voices, having all what actually religion is when it comes to justice, to equality, to advocacy for and emphasizing certain principles that we actually aspire for or look for when we are mobilizing community, like compassion, equality, equity, and kind of like motivating our religious leaders and kind of community leaders to pull people together from that perspective, from that background, had an amazing deal of influence into actually the success of our project. So when I look into project that was not pulling on all those strengths together, and projects that pulled all those actors and everybody and brought everybody on the table to have equal voice, things changed. Especially because our religions look into education and awareness and making sure that you have the resilience to go on and surpass difficulties. So this is kind of my take on it. I know that also one of the most important things that can make or break this approach is actually looking for diversity, making sure that everybody is on the table. Everybody has a say and equal say to share and to be able to build what comes next, including non-religious entities, including government entities, kind of to make sure that everybody invested in the future and invested in making sure that we are facing all these issues that we are facing together.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I think that was a comprehensive answer. You actually managed to address almost all the three questions at the same time. Thank you. I think given the issues that you raised, if you'll allow me, I would like to go to Monsignor Robert Vitilio. Father Bob, if I may, what are your own takeaways from your decades of service, not just to human rights issues and public health concerns, but frankly also to the entire humanitarian space in so many parts of the world and with so many different peoples? What would you say that your faith has enabled you to do to be a better humanitarian, for instance?
Well, first of all, maybe it's a byproduct of my age, because I'm not really sure we necessarily need to find new ways to ensure a better future for generations to come. I believe that faith traditions have been doing this since the beginning of time and need to continue to promote the values, the recognition, respect, and promotion of the dignity of each and every person from conception to natural death, as well as to care for all creation, worship God as creator of the universe in order to ensure a better future for generations to come. And just maybe one practical example. Since February of 2022, I have been convening a working group called the Catholic Response to Ukraine, a response that has included close working relationships with humanitarian programming of other faith traditions and civil society, as well as convening the major global Catholic-inspired humanitarian programs. And we've had close relationships as well with governments and multilateral organizations active with displaced persons and the entire war-affected population in Ukraine and in countries hosting refugees. In my frequent visits to Ukraine in the last 2 years, I've met many people who tell me that they lost or abandoned their faith roots during Soviet times and never before had sought to recover those roots due to the influence of secularism. But now they speak of the care that they have received from faith-related humanitarian organizations, and they are grateful that such faith-motivated outreach, as one woman told me, has helped us to cure not only our bodies, but also our hearts and souls. I believe it is the traditional, person-centered, and value-based care that is needed today, rather than some new strategy or technology that should be sought by faith-based humanitarian assistance programming. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Father Bob. And I saw Ruth with a thumbs up sign not so long ago, as when Father Bob first started speaking about this isn't something new and perhaps something that's been around for a long time. And if I may, I think, Ruth, you were one of the first people to come up with very practical examples of collaboration across faith institutions and faith lines around the world in service to anyone. And perhaps you can speak a little bit to some of what inspires you from your own faith tradition, but also what have you been able to do that has brought different, deliberately and systematically brought different faiths together?
Right. So first of all, yes, I did want to thank Father Bob for saying, like, this has been going on for time immemorial. And much of it has been within faith, because that was a centering place for people, not only the religions that we commonly know today and that are on this screen, but just in tribal communities with their own religion. It was the idea of, like, there's something central that we believe in, and part of that says we need to minister to each other. So this has been going on for a long time. I guess I'll challenge you a bit, Father Bob. I always think that those of us of a certain age should pay some attention to what's being developed newly. But beyond that, as I want to say one other thing before I answer your question, and that is, you said in passing, and I think it's important to note, that the organizations that we all recognize, and some of them huge and very powerful, so-called secular organizations, very often had their beginnings, actually formally had their beginnings in a faith tradition. I think particularly of Oxfam, which was started in the British Anglican Church and is now broader than that, and doesn't really talk much about its faith roots as some of us do, but has faith roots. But even those organizations that quite legitimately were simply started as Save the Children, or another example, International Rescue Committee, was actually started by Albert Einstein, concerned about rescuing Jews who were being pursued by the Nazis, but it chose not to have a faith orientation and to be broader and to work interfaith. But that instinct, and now I'll speak to my own tradition, but that instinct of recognizing the equal humanity in every person and working with them, because you know what it was like, either personally or historically, or maybe just vibrationally what it was like, what it was like to other people to be poor, or to be enslaved, or to be oppressed. That is the fundamental teaching of Judaism, is to pursue justice and help the other and the stranger, because that was once you. That's, like, if I had to sum it up fairly quickly, that's what I'd say. And for me, the excitement of American Jewish World Service and my decades there has two pieces. One is that we were able to educate in the American Jewish community according to those principles, and that's part of our mission statement, according to Jewish values, is a phrase in our mission statement. The job is to take care of the people who are most in need today. And without going into much detail, my current work, to the obsession and distress of my family and some of my friends and colleagues, is with immigrants and asylum seekers in New York. And part of that work is telling everyone in New York, you are barely 2 generations removed from being those immigrants. So could you, instead of attacking them, figure out how to work with them? But then I would say that the work of American Jewish World Service on the ground was very exciting, because we were working in communities where the indigenous leadership, or sometimes the expat leadership, but was doing great human rights work. You know many of these examples. Some of them had a faith base to their work, and they connected to that. Some of them didn't. But in each case, it was really exciting for us as a faith-rooted organization, American Jewish World Service, to be working in countries where there aren't that many Jews, and certainly with populations who were not Jewish, but building those connections and building, quite frankly, the sort of abstract mindset. I said once in a synagogue, when people said, sort of challenging me, like, why are you doing this work? And I was like, look, I could think of 400 places in the world today where local grassroots people, some of them facing unbelievable odds, think of the Jewish community as a community committed to justice. And they never would have thought of that. They never would have known that if we weren't working there. So it's you build those relationships by being there. And then I thought, because I like stories, to bring you just to bring you a story or two. So the favorite grant I ever made from American Jewish World Service, and I oversaw millions of dollars worth of grants. But during the Ebola crisis, when we contacted our friends in Senegal about what we might in Liberia, about how we might most be helpful. They said, well, the problem was, not surprisingly, that people didn't understand the virus, the Ebola. They didn't understand that it was being transmitted by some of their religious practices. So that's really, really complicated, right? The way that they had of honoring a person who died and respecting that person, similar to a wake or shiva, but what they were doing was actually the body was still contagious. And so telling people, like, we know you want to honor your dead relative, there were a lot of them, in your traditional fashion, but it's actually spreading the virus. So I worked with one of our grantees on the ground, and she said correctly, like the only people that will be able to advise on better public health. Oh, I should note that the US Marines were there. I mean, I want to say that nicely. They were trying to do a good job, but they were there wearing hazmat suits. They were strangers. They had no idea who they were talking to. And when they told people do X or Y, people were as likely to think that they were bringing the virus as that they were working against it. And so what we did, to make a long story short, was to make a grant from American Jewish World Service to the National Imam Council of Liberia. And we made grants so that every imam would get a basic, it was very, very simple public health guidelines, but they did in some instances interfere with Muslim religious practices. And it was the imams who went and said, we're going to do this differently because we don't want more people to die. And it was probably my most effective grant. And then I thought I'd tell you all an up-to-date story, and that is working with immigrants in New York right now. There's a mosque in the Bronx that is sheltering, quote unquote, without the authority of the law, sheltering about 40 or 50 West Africans every night who live there. And at the time of Thanksgiving, the Mormons, Latter-day Saints, appeared and asked a lot of us, like, where could we be helpful with these immigrant populations? And we named some places, and one of them was this mosque that had no food, other than what they went out and bought. And so the Mormons said, we can donate $10,000 worth of food to the mosque. And then the mosque said, that's wonderful, but we have no kitchen for cooking. And so the Interfaith Council of New York, Chloe Breyer, whom you know, contacted a Buddhist group in the Bronx. And the food, literally, the money went from the Mormons to buy the food, which was cooked by the Buddhists and served in the mosque. And for me, that's like a contemporary and very recent example, but it's what it's all about. And it's reaching people where they are. So in many parts of the world, whatever people believe, whatever their named faith, they are somewhat sustained by some hope that there are better things to come in the world. And it's reaching those people and tapping into their unbelievable resilience and their faith that things can be better, and then working alongside them. I guess the one other word that I'd love to have part of this, the dialogue and in this tape, I think all of you on here know Paul Farmer, a distinguished physician like Dr. Tom. Dr. Tom gave a beautiful expression of his rootedness in his faith. Paul did not speak in that same language, but he did speak always that the work of his health clinics and his service providers in rural Haiti and elsewhere was accompaniment. And I think it's just important to have that word in this dialogue, because we are not proselytizing, we are not telling people what to do. We are finding them where they are and accompanying them in terms of whatever they need to make change in their lives.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ruth. And I know that you had said that you might have to leave early, but I think we're going to be able to have you to share some further reflections in discussion in accompaniment with the colleagues here on this screen. Now, talking about accompaniment and given that beautiful example of the Buddhist kitchen that ultimately ended up cooking and feeding the folks in the mosque who were able to get the food thanks to the Church of Latter-day Saints. That's a beautiful story and example. I know that Deborah Boudreau, you have stewarded many of those kinds of instances and very practical giving of services around the world. And usually when different religious organizations or religious representatives come together, our Christian brethren end up taking quite a lot of time because they are the largest and most representative and most diversely present. And then come our slightly less present Muslim and slightly less present Jews, but all of them doing incredibly fantastic work. We often forget to see and overlook the role being done by Buddhist humanitarian and human rights actors and organizations, also because so much of that tends to be stewarded by people who do not wish to be in the limelight, because it's their service that counts much more than their personhood or their institutionalism. So, Deborah, you are in the limelight right now. Please tell us your own narratives and why you feel that the faith that has inspired this remarkable organization you head and that serves hundreds of millions around the world, why you feel that that brings an added value to the humanitarian space, and knowing you to be someone who has been deeply collaborative from the get-go, unlike so many others. Tell us a little bit about your experiences of working together with others.
Thank you, Dr. Asa Karim and Dr. Sarah and Tom and Father Vitilo. I have to say, Ruth, I was in New York. I witnessed the shelter. Not only Buddhists cooking the food, Buddhists also delivering the blanket made by plastic bottle. Dharma Master Zheng Yan, like Dr. Asa Karim indicate, Tzu Chi is a Buddhist organization since 1966. Our founder, Dharma Master Zheng Yan, you can see the picture, her hands, two hands, left and right, holding together your big thumb to bring the humanitarian together. So she always teaching people, no matter what kind of religious belief, your compassion, your wisdom, bonding together and align with together. This is compassion and unity. Turn around is your heart. Bring the heart together. So Buddha Tzu Chi Foundation have 4 major missions: charity, medical, education, humanitarian. From here, expanded to international disaster relief, environmental awareness, and mirror donor registry, and community volunteers. So for the current crisis, I remember 2014, the UNCCC in Peru. That time, we already think about so many trash around the events, the conference. We use so many styrofoam. We create the pollution. We are not finding the solution. But Tzu Chi has been doing this one for so many years. 33 years ago, it's already people using your clapping 2 hands to do the recycling. But nobody know what are you doing. So at that time, we started engage the United Nations platform. I have to say thank you to Dr. Asa Karim. 2016, she bring us to Istanbul. She bring us to share humanitarian actions. She opened the door for people to know, besides Dalai Lama, there's another Buddhist group. It's already into the community, the grassroots movement already in place. Honestly, currently, Buddhist, we have 3 initiatives. Number 1 is humanitarian action. Number 2 is the environmental compassion action. Number 3, we try to bring the community, everyone together to promote vegetarianism, plant-based diet. These 3 pillars echoes Buddha's teaching and core value, the kindness, the sustainability, and respect all forms. Honestly, when we talk about Buddha's cooking, LDS provide funding, Buddha's cooking, we have been debating quite some time. Are we going to give them something healthy, or we give them something, make them feel they have some food in their tummy? So we started to balance. We need to empower them. So in alignment with the principle of no harm, also called ahimsa, we champion the adoption of plant-based diet as an expression of our reverence for all sentient beings. 慈济 as an exemplar of compassion, we spearheads a global movement advocating for plant-based vegetarianism and ethical eating. Despite we facing a lot of challenges, 慈济 founder Dharma Master Zheng Yan, she has persistently implored all sentient beings to support this movement. For 2014, UNCCC COP20, we started to push this concept for ethical eating. 8 years now. Annually, I believe we have more than 3 million people pledged to become vegetarian for one day, only January 11, okay, because New Year resolutions. But now I would like to invite everybody to think about how many people are vegetarian right now. I'm talking with every one of you, but I'm Google on the other computers. The Google tell me, as of 2022, 5 to 8% of the United States population declare themselves as a vegetarian. And 9.7 million Americans are vegetarian, and about 1 million do not consume any animal products. About 10% of Americans have the age over 18 fall within the category of vegetarian or vegan. Try to imagine COP20, that time, ethical eating. What do you mean ethical eating? I'm not going to join with you. I need to have meat. But now you see, Impossible Burger, Beyond Burger, everything you go, people started. Do you have a vegan food? All I'm trying to share with here, if you don't do it, if you don't do nothing, if we do nothing useful, and our life will pass by in the vain. But if we keep working for the betterment of mankind, ours will be a great life. So from the vegetarian movement, what is Buddha's doing? We go to the shelters, we provide food for empower the vulnerable health, to guide them to eat healthy, to guide them to balance their diet. We provide recycling blanket, we give them warmth. That warmth they can carry with them. But they also know when we consume plastic, this plastic has become a circular economy, become a blanket to keep me warm, to help me to help others. So Buddha's in action, compassion in action. Tzu Chi more focus for the local grassroots adaptation. So a lot of project is into the community, and it's from your heart. When we talk about compassion, when we talk about united into one solidarity, we have to have our mind and heart and soul. The compassion is empowerment from yourself. When we come to this world, Buddha's already teaching us. Almighty God all teaching us. Love is the only solution when we face the current challenges.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Deborah. You've covered so much, way beyond the question and deep into the territory of compassion itself. Thank you for that. We have about 15 minutes remaining in this conversation, and we've already got a couple of questions from audience, and I think we should try to honor them as much as possible. If we don't mind, we'll go back to the order of the youngest amongst us leading and the wisest. One of the questions, Sarah, is there is amongst many in the younger generation a deep skepticism perhaps towards organized religion. And given that kind of skepticism, how do you in your work, and I'm going to come to Father Bob and Ruth and others also with this question, given that kind of skepticism, how do you yourself adapt and engage in such a way that it can resonate with younger colleagues?
Thank you, Dr. Karam. As I don't know if it's obvious or not, but I come from Islamic tradition. So I was born into a Muslim family. And most of my young years, I was a skeptic. I was also a skeptic. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand most of it. And I was also always asking the harder questions, and that I was faced with, we do not ask this question, we just follow, right? However, like the older I got and the more I got to learn and kind of embody my tradition, my Islamic religious background into my work, the more I understood that actually I feel like I was born a humanitarian, because I am born with with my religion. And I do believe that most of the principles and the values that are represented in Islam are represented in most religions. And the more I learn about other religions, the more I know that we share the kind of like the essence of the religions we shared, which is the essence of God. In Islam, there's some principles that I, for example, identify with and care for so much, which is one of them is al-Rahmah, for example. And it's mercy and compassion, and how you have to deal with things and with animals, with the plants, with anything that surrounds your environment, not only yourself and others, from your own, like as humans. And I think that is one principle that we have to apply in every single conversation, in every single interaction that we are trying to do with the young generation, with the people who are rejectful to certain ideas, and with the communities that are affected so much they have forgotten the values or the principles that we are talking about. And if we kind of like come from that door, like embodied by the principles that we carry, which is compassion, mercy, justice oriented, the importance of the sisterhood and the brotherhood and being together. I think that kind of communicates any message that we try to communicate much stronger. When it comes to, for example, one of the greatest issue, and Dr. Deborah have talked about, which is the climate change and what we are and how we are dealing with the earth and Mother Earth, and how we are kind of ending up ruining things, as you said, Dr. Karam. In Islam, for example, there is a very uniqueness when it comes to the relationship of the individual to the earth, which is putting the person as a khalifatun fil ard, which is the people have a stewardship over the earth. And that means that we have to take care of it, not only use it and abuse it, but actually caring for it for the generation to come, and holding the value of the importance, especially when, like, if you look at the creation itself, the humans came out of the earth. Like Adam was created from the earth itself, from turab al-earth, and that kind of like give not only and the importance of our contribution to the change that we want to see in the future, but also to the importance, like religious and adding the inner, like the faith value to this conversation, it kind of it gives a little bit of the importance that we need to serve in bringing that, the importance of this conversation, of the faith conversation, when we are bringing it into the change conversation.
Thank you, Sarah. I think you've beautifully captured it. And I think the idea of stewardship is very close to the idea of accompaniment, is very close to the idea of living the kind of reality that you wish to lead and impart to others, as many have said. And given that notion of accompaniment and leadership and service that is so essential to counter the sense of skepticism about organized religion, doing so through lived practical experience of service that is faith inspired, that obviously takes me straight to Monsignor Vitillo. What would you say, what have you been saying, Father Bob, to those more skeptical younger generations? How do you reach out and exemplify and or deal with the skepticism towards organized religion? The Catholic Church is one of the largest organized religious institutions in the world, if not the only. How have you been dealing with some of this skepticism? You're muted, Father Bob. Excuse me, you're muted just on.
Okay. One thing we find in the Catholic Church is that there are many young people who have not really been involved in the church because their parents had been separated from church. Sometimes they had positive reaction, sometimes they had positive experience, sometimes negative experiences. But we find more and more young people who are looking for that sense of community. And many times they do find it in religious expression. They're not always familiar. They're not comfortable in the worship that we have, but they also are interested in learning this and experiencing it together. And then, as was just said, service is a very, very important way to engage people in the values that we learn in faith about the unique dignity of each person, and about the fact that we have a loving God who has created all of us and created our universe that we need to protect. For now, since many years, starting with Saint Pope John Paul II, the Catholic Church has been gathering people in a world youth experience. It used to be every year in different parts of the world. Now it's once every 3 years, but on the intervening years, we gather them in local communities. And that's a way of helping to expose them and to feel the positivity of doing things together and doing it within a faith context. I think Pope Francis captured the connection between faith and humanitarianism in many ways, and he lives it. He doesn't only talk about it and write it, but in his first encyclical letter, Laudato Si, he said, the word creation has a broader meaning than nature, for it has to do with God's loving plan in which every creature has its own value and significance. Nature is usually seen as a system which can be studied, understood, and controlled, whereas creation can only be understood as a gift from the outstretched hand of the Father of all, and as a reality illuminated by the love which calls us together into universal communion. And I think one of our ways of serving and protecting and renewing and healing our world that has been so abused by all of us because of our own greed and selfishness is for us to see this as part of expressing our faith. Pope Francis, 87 years old, was bound and determined to bring this message to COP28 in Dubai. Regrettably, yesterday, his doctors insisted that he cancel his trip because he has a very serious infection with influenza. But hopefully his untiring insistence on this message will help me, you, and so many other people in our entire human family, but become better humanitarians and better carers for our common home of Earth and of the entire universe.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Father Bob. And again, I think it's that emphasis on the service aspect, the accompaniment aspect, the showing how mercy actually translates into our daily lives that can address some of that skepticism, because you have the real live living breathing example of what it is like to be a person of faith in service of others. Thank you for underlining that. Now, before I go to Ruth and to Deborah, I do need to also make sure, and Sarah, I need a very quick response from you as well about this, because one of the questions has to do with the digital age impacting religious belief. Now, we can think of many things, but maybe just please refer to that too as you put in your concluding comments. So Ruth, the floor is yours now. Skepticism and the digital age.
Okay, and the digital age, as you know, requires me to leave my laptop in about 10 minutes, and I will try to stay connected to all of you on my phone. I'm wondering if skepticism isn't a phenomenon that probably had, like to go Father Bob, quote Father Bob again, existed in more eras than we like to admit. Yes, people were told what to do, and yes, there was probably a higher degree of you follow the tradition, you follow the faith, you follow the leader. But I think skepticism among thinking people has probably been around for a while. And one of the things that Father Bob was saying, he and I seem to be on very much on the same wavelength here, was with young people is they need to see their religion in practice. So yes, if you tell them, like, could you show up next week and the pews are empty and we need you for the mass, or we need you for the Shacharit service, or we need you for whatever, they're like, why bother? But if you tap into their interests, and an interest that they may have in service or in being of use to someone else, and then you engage them, and then you say, by the way, this is a piece of what our faith teaches, and by the way, this is a piece of what other faith teaches, then I think you have a way of reaching them. And that relates directly to social media, because that is how they communicate. And frankly, if we being the broadest universe of faith-rooted people concerned about service, interested in advocacy, you know, I will never let you use the word service without advocacy. We don't have enough chicken soup to feed the world, so we do have to change some of the rules. But if you reach out and engage people, and you reach young people where they are, and they see, oh, look, this is something else. This is a friend of mine is now posting that she participates in this demonstration as an expression of her or his faith, or is showing up to actually help give out coats. I mean, just got a note from an assemblyman in New York saying, anybody with a warm men's coat, please bring it to this address. Now, that will happen. That's a secular political enterprise. But if a local church or synagogue or mosque in his district says, oh, we can help in this way, and then uses social media, or uses some, excuse my language, but some younger person on their staff to say, can you put this out in a way where young people will see it, you'll get some people. I thought of two other stories, since I might not be able to stay on, that are related to this outreach and the flexibility of faith leaders and the idea of interfaith. So Ibu Patel, who I know is known to you, runs the Interfaith Youth Corps in Chicago, says that, you know, instead of, in his book, he says, instead of telling young people, here's what to do to be of service, we get every synagogue, church, and mosque in an area to send their young people together to make sandwiches. Then you will create interfaith work. Then they will see it differently, but they will discover that everybody's there because their religious tradition suggests to them that this is something they should participate in, and that's how you build relationships and connections. And then I thought of one other story, which is not directly related to your last question, but I do want to talk about it because I think it also relates, which several of the panelists have mentioned, to the need for faith leaders to be flexible. So I gave you the Liberia example, but I just remembered one other example. In the year 2000, when I was heavily involved in HIV/AIDS work, I went to a White House conference, and to the credit of the White House conference, they had convened interfaith leaders of every type from as many places in the world as they could find them to talk about how collaboratively they might work on the AIDS crisis. And we were at small tables, and I happened to be at the table, and I don't remember the country, but I happened to be at the table with the Episcopal bishop from some African country. And there were just like 5 people going around the table and talking about what they were doing. And he said in this beautiful British inflected African deep voice, "We now tell our parish priests that they must tell their congregants to discuss sex at the breakfast table." And it was just like, okay, these people are accommodating. It was obviously hard for him to get this sentence out. And imagine him telling a bunch of Episcopal priests in Africa, oh, there's something new. But it was like, you want to make a difference. And in this case, you want to save the lives of your parishioners, which there's probably no more important goal. Then you have to change the way you do things. And it was just for me like, okay, this is what faith-based work can be all about if it can be in tune with the people who it's trying to help, and if it can be responsive to the situations on the ground.
Perfect, thank you. And I was wondering when and at what point we might get to this discussion about women and men and what happens between them. That seems to still be the biggest taboo thing in almost all faith traditions, and manifests in many different ways also in humanitarian service provision, because where and what do women need that may not be what men need as forcibly displaced people, as immigrants, as members of a community in which violence can sometimes be the normal way of and behavior. So we kind of didn't get there, but I think with that little opening, how about we try to sum up? So Deborah,
well, let me just add to that, and then I'll let you sum up, and I'll just be listening. But yes, you're absolutely right. There's that sex issue. And I just want to broaden that. You and I are in another discussion about what are children's rights in the time of war, and what do different faiths say about that. And what is, there's no value in a faith battle, the consequences of which are lots of dead people, especially children who have no say in the matter. And also you talk about gender issues and gender violence and having to look at some of that and what do faiths say about that. And I would just add that the same thing is true with the LGBT community. We need to recognize everyone who is in our universe and figure out how we relate to them. And that's sometimes complicated in a faith that may not approve of some behaviors or may have a different notion about the role of women, but nevertheless need to figure out how to stretch to work with everybody. And
thank
it's
you,
the
Ruth.
challenge to
Thank you, Ruth. I'm really sorry, but one of the things about the interfaith space is this ability to hear and listen to one another and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak their wisdom. So thank you for that. I think you've lovingly encapsulated some of the most difficult issues. So I don't need to go there. That's grand. Now let's see how Deborah and Monsignor Vitillo and then Sarah, your concluding points about the skepticism, about technology, about women, share some of those thoughts as your concluding narrative to why faith can be a space for humanitarianism that adds value to what we all need in our lives. Deborah.
This is a very interesting and healthy conversation. And I love Sarah saying, but honestly, the panel we have a very good intergeneration panelist and also gender balance panelist. For the technology wise, I do think our old generation, our wisdom elder need to share our story. Those stories need to be in Facebook, Instagram, in all the social media. So when the young generation look into this kind of tradition, they can have a place to use scientific approach to validate the statement. This is so critical. No matter it's gender equality, food biased, or something like that. Really, let's look into yesterday is Giving Tuesday. How many young generation involved to Giving Tuesday? How many old generation, the elder and wisdom group support Giving Tuesday? This is a very interesting topics. I love it. But for the Buddhist, I would like to emphasize, when we talk about 3 pillars, 3 initiatives, my founder, Master Zheng Yan, always say, we as a faith-based organization, and we are non-state actor, we are not government agency, we determine this direction, like little ants, ascending the formidable mountain, Mountain Himalaya, Mountain Sumi. We know this is mission impossible. This is mission impossible, but we have committed. We want to propel our future together. So in unity against so many challenges, Tzu Chi, we continue emphasize promoting plant-based living, supporting no-killing movement, and leading humanitarian and climate action. So we pledged to uphold this principle because by doing so, intergeneration, no matter what kind of religious background you are, we can transform it, the power of compassion, and envision the world where healing and reconciliation can prevail. So, intergeneration, interreligious, interconnectedness, the only thing is collaboration and partnership. That's the goal. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. And now I'd like to give the floor and the last words of wisdom before we go to the ultimate last word, which is going to be the youngest amongst us, because that's our future and our present. Monsignor Vitillo, your parting words of wisdom on the theme, please. You're muted.
I know, yes. First of all, on the digital age, I think that Pope Francis has the third largest number of followers in Twitter. I don't like the word X. So I think, the religious leaders are involved in the digital age, and I suspect that most of his followers are younger people. On our gender balance, I don't think we're very well balanced gender-wise, but I'm privileged to be with such wise women, and I'm grateful to be here. And I think in terms of sex, Asa, you and I were involved in doing some training of UN officials on HIV and AIDS, and also on the role of faith-based organizations on that. And I think you and I were able to handle the sex issues much easier than the UN people did. So I think, to me, my own faith community is not in any way afraid of sex or discouraging sexual relationships, but we think we should do this within the context of the dignity of each person and within the context of faithfulness and commitment. But I think I just wanted to raise a group of mentors that have meant very much to me in the whole area of interreligious service, and that's the Interreligious Peace Platform in Central African Republic. It's led equally by the Cardinal Archbishop of Bangui, by the head of the chief imam of the country, and the head of the Protestant church in the country. And each of them has suffered by having their houses destroyed by the religious extreme. I shouldn't say, I refuse to use the concept of religious extremists, because I don't think people of true religion become those kinds of extremists. But they've had their houses destroyed, and each one of them has hosted the others when that has happened. And then they go 3 at a time to the communities that have suffered this kind of extremism. And they show, both by their love for each other and their caring for each other as for all people, how this is not something that's in true religion. I've hosted them many times here in Geneva, and also I had been among the people who nominated them for the Sergio de Mello Peace Prize for the peaceful dialogue here in Geneva. And I can tell you, they've taught me a great deal about true love in the context of religion, different religions, but also true love that are bound together by common values.
Beautiful. Thank you. And thank you for honoring them this way, because they have indeed, they continue to be exemplars of precisely that which all of you do yourselves and follow and embody, which is to show that in spite of the resistance, in spite of the high personal costs sometimes, in spite of the extraordinarily high social and political costs, to serve together, to collaborate together in service to all, remains the way that faith continues to exist, inspire, and help us move forward. Thank you for doing that and for mentioning that. And thank you to all of you. But I have still one more question to give to our present and future for her parting words. Now, Dr. Sara Ahmed, please, what are your parting words to all of us?
Thank you, Dr. Karam. And it ties back to what my last answer to the question, and in the face of the many challenges that we have mentioned today, and many more that probably will be coming in the future. Of course, interfaith collaboration stands, and probably it is one of the most it's the most hopeful things that we have, and we held as like a beacon of hope to continue forward, kind of offering this diverse perspective and collaborative strength, for the effectiveness of the humanitarian efforts and what we are trying to do to make change. And of course, while there is so many difficulties and challenges, like if we are looking at the theological differences or the stereotypes that exist, proactive steps can actually foster so much understanding, and that happens through education and learning and listening and dialogues like this and many others that can be very effective. And as we all said here, and we mentioned, of course, engaging the young generation and the youth is the most important key, and to keep them engaged, to keep them interested, which is a really hard thing to do now with this technological age and with technology in general. So educational program, exposing them as much as to different faiths, to different humanitarian efforts, to combination of those two is very important to nurture and develop a generation that is committed to tolerance and committed to cooperation among each other. The technology today provides a crucial and a powerful tool for reaching everywhere and for mobilizing as well, not only for reaching people, but mobilizing the youth and mobilizing people to do change. So with social media campaigns or online platforms like Twitter or others, YouTube, I can sit and recite them forever, but these platforms and technology actually facilitate dialogue. So kind of like balancing the principle of secularism while acknowledging the positive impact of faith-based effort is very important as a next step for the future. The focus should be on shared humanitarian goals and elevating the suffering and promoting justice and equality, and building a sustainable future from all aspects, and in embracing young people and youth engagement, fostering understanding as well among multiple levels and all around, and leveraging the most important tool now that we have, which is technology. We can actually collaboratively move forward and journey toward a more compassionate and just world.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Sara. Monsignor Robert Vitilio, Ms. Dr. Deborah Boudreau, our remarkable leader, Ruth Messenger. See, Monsignor Vitilio, it takes at least 3 women to try to balance you out a little bit. That's how we do gender balance these days. And hopefully we'll be able to continue our journey of engagement together with more different kinds of gender balances in the picture. Thank you so much for everything that you do, each one of you, as you each exemplify precisely that which we need. We are facing a technological future in which many, many, many things will be done by machines. What will keep us different is our humanity, our faith, and the way in which we honor the creator and creation. And we cannot do it alone, no matter how big our institutions, how much our financial resources, how extensive our size. The ultimate difference will be made in how we show that what we believe is in this creation for one another, and the fact that we do have to pay a price, perhaps in our own comfort, in order to be of service to one another. That is what all faiths demand that we do. That is where the best exemplars of human survival and faithfulness to the principles of our very existence and the creation of that which we are each called upon to do by our Creator is to exemplify the love, the compassion, the mercy together, for our Creator created us many and different. We are not meant to be all alike. We are not meant to look alike. We are not meant to speak alike, but we are meant to serve the creation together. That is a belief system that has inspired everything we know today, whether in secular or in religious entities or those which are in between. That is the mission each of you brings to a reality, and for which those of us who believe will remain eternally grateful to you, to your beliefs, and to that which we must continue to serve. May the Creator bless you all, and many sincere thanks to the Aurora platform, which has convened us together and organized it so very well. This is a testament to what they believe in as a peoples themselves, as partners, to Tanenbaum for what they do for the world. Many, many thanks. May we always meet in service together to the divine with honesty and integrity and compassion, and may you be blessed. Thank you.